Okay, so I'm going to present some results we're doing in the context of DISPEC project. And this is work package 4 of this project. And this package basically is about the analysis of long-term trends in ionospheric time series. And this ionospheric time series, actually, they are built up or computed from a historical data set of over 2 solar cycles. The historical data set we're using from UPC is the output of a tomographic model. So basically it consists of electron density in different voxels, 2 layers, and the ambiguity, because it only uses carrier phase, and it does the ionospheric combination. Out of that electron density, then you can build up several products, which are listed in here. The VTEC is actually maybe the well known because it's what the global ionospheric maps I'm representing, but also you can obtain VTEC ready maps. The electron density is actually the output. And then you can also build up, because it's a 2 layers tomographic model, you can build up vertical VTEC ready maps. DCV time series as well, but and global electron content time series, but I'm not going to talk about this in this presentation. And finally, a kind of a local KP index, which is called the I-scale or ionospheric storm index map. You can build up long-term series here. And in the case of VTEC, for example, you can build up time series to sequence of the maps themselves. And if you want to analyze, try to detect, characterize any spatial or spatiotemporal structures here, a well-standard procedure is you pick up 1 map at a time, you do singular value decomposition for that map, and you see the main structures. The main one, the one that contributes the most, is the equatorial electron density in the equator ionospheric anomaly. And then you have higher order elements which contribute less to the energy of the image. If you have many images, the usual procedure is you just vectorize each image. So you build up a matrix where each column is a GIM, a global ionospheric map, and then you do single value decomposition, and you get a basis of the time evolution and then a basis of space. But because you have squeezed each GIM, the spatial structures are somehow modified in this case. So an alternative to this is do single value decomposition of tensors. So you just keep the movie and you use one of the many algorithms out there, and many of them used for image processing. And in particular, we have used one which is called target decomposition or high order single value decomposition. Basically what it does is a factorization of the tensor into this product that we can see here, which is 3 matrices, ABC. Each of them corresponds to the basis, latitude, longitude, and time, and the core, which is a tensor, which basically is not singular values. They are related, but basically those coefficients are the intensity of the different vectors and different bases. And you can see some blank spaces here in A and the matrices and the core. That would be zeros in there. And this is a case where you can do compression image, which is one of the most used applications of this tensor decomposition. Then you can build up actually 2D maps by tensor product of 2 different bases here. And this is what we're going to spend some time here. So first a look to the time vectors or chronovectors. At the top, we have the first one, the first mode, and it follows the familiar evolution of the solar cycle, of the VTEC, the total VTEC. And on the right, we have the second mode, which oscillates. And at the bottom, we have the same, but we have normalized the GIMs here just to have a better idea of the relative contribution within each map, regardless of the intensity of the radiation for that map. If we combine 3 of the chronovectors, we can build up orbits, and we can see things like at the top, we have the combination of the 3 time vectors for the VTEC. They are not close, these clouds. The color just indicates the season, but they are not closed. And whereas at the bottom we have the VTEC gradient maps, the composition of that map or that movie, and we can see it's just the difference on the left and right is only the view. So we have zenithal view on the right, and we can see that the VTEC gradients, they form a close orbit, which brings the idea of potential development for forecasting, at least for VTEC gradients. Whereas for the other one is not that clear because that orbit is not close over there. If we do the Fourier transformation of the time vectors of the basis, we get this as examples. The first two are the first two modes, and we can spot a semi-annual on the first mode, which actually the first mode is mostly related to the equatorial anomaly, and you have every 6 months, you have the highest intensity on the north, 6 months later on the south. The second one is an annual variation, because actually, since the geomagnetic equator is not aligned with the geographic equator, you have different intensities, and that intensity doesn't repeat in 6 months. It repeats once a year. Interestingly, the fourth mode, we pick something that is close to 14 days, it's semi-monthly peak. And there are several papers about this period in the ionosphere. In particular, we have studied this one here from Tang et al. In 2021, where they presented the semi-monthly lunar time modulation in FOF2. If we do the same for the time vectors of the gradients, things are more exotic, I would say. The first mode has multimodal peaks. It has the annual, but also the semi-annual and smaller periods. And the third mode presents the semi-monthly peak. And then if we go further up, we can see smaller modes at 4 or 5 days even. If we do a combination of two bases, starting by spatial bases, longitude and latitude, you get modes, but the first mode is different from a singular value decomposition, a classical singular value decomposition. If you do classical singular value decomposition over one single gene, the first mode is basically a kind of an eye, which is the monopole, let's call it, of the equatorial anomaly. And then the second mode, it will be the dipole representation. In here, you already have the dipole in first. But as you increase the order, the intensity in the G tensor, the core, goes down. So we have added here 400 order map, which is basically noise. And this one is interesting because what we do here is tensor product between the latitude basis and the time basis. And what we get is these two maps for the first and the second order. The first order, the first plot actually is a profile, the variation of the equatorial anomaly or the electron content along latitude. When you do the products with the time vectors, basically what you get is the evolution of this profile, which is basically the plot on the image on the top. And you can, I don't know if you can see it, but it is very green, close between 0 and 50. This is 1 year evolution only. The south looks greener than the north. And then if we approach to half the year, summer in the north, the greener side shifts to the north. That's basically the oscillation, the half month oscillation. If we compute the Vary center for this profile, and we do the same for each profile at each epoch, we get this image. This image basically corresponds to the angle. It's not exactly 23 degrees, but it's basically the angle of between the ecliptic plane and the equatorial plane. So we can see the oscillation in here as well due to that effect. We have presented long-term trends in global ionospheric maps, but also it is possible to spot specific geophysical events or geophysical structures. And this is an example using not VTEC, but the electron density vertical gradient And the plot on the right is of a voxel near Samos, the location of Samos. The day before the earthquake, you have these oscillations. The oscillations between 35 and 40 hours could be seasonal TADs. But pay attention to the difference in scales. So the first plot goes up to 25, whereas the second one, on the day of the earthquake, goes up to 300 millitech units per kilometer. And this is actually the top side of the two layers, which is between 700 and 1400. So in between, I think is somewhere is the location of the height, but it's around 1100 kilometers. So you can see here the green one, which locates the earthquake, and this huge increase here in the electron density. This is not Vitas, it's electron density gradient, vertical gradient, and then it goes down. This actually was reported in a paper, which I have in the last version of this presentation, but not in here, sorry. If you have... Alfonso Tal, thank you. And actually, there are some co-authors here that you can ask them for details. According to Manuel is one of the authors, Manuel Hernandez, and he told me some discrepancies among different tsunami propagation theories. So it's very interesting that this one is triggering some theoretical discussions as to how the gravity waves from tsunamis can propagate up to which height, etc. And the next one is a movie showing this. On the right, you can see the propagation of the tsunami. And on the left is voxels at electron density in voxels at 1,130 kilometers height. It moves because the computation of the tomographic model is on a sun-fixed model, so that's why it's rotating with respect to the ground. And well, there are some coincidences into the increase of the electron density, coincident with the front wave, not on top, of course, because there's also the drift from the electrons that which you can see. So it's actually farther south of the location of the tsunami. Another product which I mentioned before is the ionospheric storm scale, which is basically you take global ionospheric maps, you compute the hourly VTEC, which is this GTC here, and you just compare with respect the median of that value for the last 27 days, and then you normalize this with the median and the standard deviation for different seasons, and you get this index, which basically tells you at every location at the same day how different the VTEC is there with respect to previous days. So in a quiet day like this one, you can see that the electron DST is not indicating any geomagnetic storm. We have here a classical VTC image with the equatorial anomaly here. But if you compute then the PTC, or the index, the scale index, is very green. You cannot actually tell, if you don't know this plot, where the equatorial anomaly is. And you have these low values between -1, +1, something -2 here, because it's just comparing. For example, this red pixel here, it was already red the day before, and the day before, if there is no geomagnetic storm in between. So you can see this rather green plot. What happens if there's a storm? And you see this, and this was very, very strong that happened in November 2004. The storm we had in May this year was even stronger. And this basically indicates something that we already also observed with the May this year storm, which is that the equatorial ionospheric anomalies, the lobes, they displace farther south and north. Is that the electron density is basically increasing up in the north and the south in regions where they usually don't reach this big. This goes to 5 units, standard units deviation. We've seen 20 units in the storm that happened last May. And also we We have started actually because this all these I-scale maps since 1996 will steam processing. Its computational loading is quite demanding, and we have computed preliminary results. We have done the single value composition using the tensorial single value composition, and we can also spot classical values like the 27 peak here, but also this one is the semi-monthly peak again in here, and many others that we still have to identify. And finally, using that I-scale maps, it turns out we have learned recently, a few weeks ago, from these three colleagues, Mohammad Arjim, Thomas Haddad, and Herman Centur, sorry for the pronunciation. And basically, they spotted in these I-scale maps the effects of a cyclone. This is the image of the cyclone. These three images were kindly provided by them. We have the track of the cyclone here, and the scale is the wind speed, maximum wind speed. This is just to see the DST and the key page to indicate that it was, from the point of view of space weather, it was rather quiet day. And we have a quiet I scale here, but then something starts to happen here at 21, which is when the highest peak was achieved here, the highest wind speed. And it's further increasing here. It looks like, again, the lobes. I asked about what is the physics behind it, because this is not gravity wave. They do produce gravity wave, mostly when it hits the Indian subcontinent or when it hits land. But in the middle of the ocean, what is happening here, if it's gravity waves, you don't see gravity waves in these maps, because these maps is deviation of the electron content. A gravity wave just oscillates up and down, but you still have the same amount of electron content. According to them, the physics behind it is basically that you have, they will publish this, there are many more data and plots, but there's an increase in, the increase in lining is so high that it ionizes water vapor of that region. With a combination of strengthening the electric field, it releases electrons, and then the drift along the magnetic lines is what makes these lobes appear in the south and then further up in the north. So basically, yes. No, it opens a lot of questions, of course, but it will be interesting because this there is no space weather effect that could explain these lobes. And these lobes is 3-4 sigma units, which we don't see this in days like this. That's a possible explanation. They also will provide vertical profiles with cosmic data. So eventually this month, I guess, they will publish it. And I think that's basically it. The conclusion is just that, yes, data set of gems, in this case, with several two solar cycles, they can help to analyze and characterize spatial-temporal structures. This specific algorithm for factorization of tensors is also very useful. It doesn't reshape anything, so it preserves the spatial-temporal structures, and it can characterize and spot seasonal structures like annual, semi-annual, semi-monthly, the ecliptic oscillation of the equatorial anomaly, and then different products out of the tomographic data set, like I-scale maps and also the vertical electron density. It turns out you can spot some high energy energetic geophysical phenomena that, in particular, the cyclone wasn't our idea. I mean, the team with the global ionosphere maps we're using here was somebody else using it, and it seems that it can detect. It's still open, but it's a good question to answer. And that will be all.